Okay, hopefully that's in the right place because otherwise I fucked up. We're still working things out. Hey guys. So today we're doing the second case in my Zodiac Killer series, which is the murder of Cheri Jo Bates. This is another one that isn't officially connected to the Zodiac, but it is suspected that he is responsible. And the Zodiac Killer has taken responsibility for this murder, though they can't prove it evidence-wise. They can prove consistencies, but they can't prove that it was definitely the Zodiac. Cheri Josephine Bates was 18 years old on October 30th, 1966, when she left her home and left a note that said, "Dad went to RCC Library." So RCC was the Riverside City College where she attended. She was a freshman, I believe, by her age. And it was in Riverside, California. But after she left the note, her dad grew concerned after she didn't come home. She was usually at the library pretty late, but it was not characteristic of her to either like not call, not say anything, and she wasn't there the next morning, so he reported her missing. They found her on campus of RCC, and she had been killed at approximately 9:30 p.m. the night before, the night she disappeared, and she was beaten and stabbed multiple times with a knife with a short blade. This is consistent with the knife that the Zodiac or the killer because it's not necessarily the killer in the case we just covered, the Robert Dominguez and Linda Edwards murders. It was consistent with the knife that he would have used to cut open Linda's bathing suit. There was no evidence of robbery or sexual assault, which is consistent with the Zodiac. He just attacked her randomly. And her car was intentionally disabled and was parked near the alleys. She wasn't able to, what they've kind of determined or suspect is that she tried to get into her car, it wasn't working. And basically, there are probably a million scenarios surrounding this, but like from what I can gather, the killer was waiting for her, probably offered her help, probably offered her a ride somewhere, and then led her into the alley and killed her. Evidence that was found at the scene was a men's Timex watch, which the strap was measured for a wrist about 7 inches, a military-style heel print, which indicated 8 to 10 size shoe, so he was not on the smaller side, but just like probably not a big, scary guy. He was probably a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter. The washer is really loud right now, so I might just have to re-record this, but it's fine. This is so much harder than it needs to be. So this murder was considered an individual event until 1969. The Lake Berryessa murders occurred in 1969 in September, and I referred to those in the last video, but I didn't make it clear as to what they were because I hadn't done my kind of overview of the Zodiac killings wasn't as in-depth as to identify that as like a Zodiac murder. You know, it was a little bit of a weird reference that like unless you had studied the Zodiac killings, like you wouldn't have known, so I'm sorry if that was confusing. It's one of the first official like Zodiac killings identified as being like the Zodiac killer was responsible. So when comparisons are drawn from the unofficial cases to that case, it's basically because that one is certain, and so the connections are what leads us to believe that these unofficial cases are actually the responsibility of the Zodiac. There are similarities between those two, seeing as, you know, she wasn't raped, she wasn't robbed, there was no evident reason for this attack. The Lake Berryessa murders were with a gun, so that is kind of the only real difference between the two. But yeah, a lot of the details are pretty consistent and aren't like super outlandish that this would be attributed to the Zodiac killer. So they thought this was an individual event, and they suspected Bob Burnett, who lived in the area. He had gone to school with Cheri Jo, and he was rumored to have dated her around the time of the murders, but he was cleared in 1998 when they tested samples of hair that they had found in Cheri Jo's hand, like under her fingers and like clutched into her hand, which she must have grabbed and torn out during the attack. But they tested his DNA against the hairs and they were not a match, so he was officially cleared. And he then went on in an interview after this happened to disparage like all the rumors that he had dated her because he was actually involved in a serious relationship at the time with a different person. How it was tied in with the Zodiac is that there were similarities with this murder and the Lake Berryessa killings, and Also the fact that the Zodiac took credit for this murder in a letter to the LA Times. He could have, at this point, the profiling, I guess, of the Zodiac killer would allude to the fact that he would just take credit for any kind of murder. He just like wants, for lack of a better word, the clout associated with the murder. He was just like, all right,
free killing that they're gonna accuse me of, I'll take it because they're not gonna catch me.
And he wants the recognition for that murder, because that goes back to my first video where we kind of like went through like why serial killers do what they do. Well, a lot of it is because they need attention, they need affirmation that they're important in some way, or they have power. So basically, like, he took credit for it. So it's kind of one of those things where you can put as much meaning behind it as you want to, but it really doesn't hold a lot of weight without real proof. And they have like circumstantial evidence, they have like some stuff, but there's no like DNA tie to it because they don't have a sample to test against. A sequence of other letters sent in the year after Cheri's murder were attributed to the Zodiac. However, the Riverside Police Department believe they know who committed the murder, but it wasn't the Zodiac. However, he did write the letters. So basically, the letters received immediately after Cheri's murder to the Riverside Police Department were written by the Zodiac, so either he knew the killer or the Riverside Police Department are suspecting someone who is responsible for all the Zodiac, like maybe they know who the Zodiac killer is on accident by thinking that this is an individual event. I have no idea. There wasn't a lot of information about that. However, it was confirmed that the Zodiac did write the letters to that police department, to the LA Times, mentioning Cheri Jo. So that, like, there's that connection as well. The letters that were received by the Riverside Police Department immediately after her murder, one of them was titled The Confession, and I have a copy of it that I'll show you guys, but the letter was typed and individual quotes said things like Miss Bates was stupid, she went to the slaughter like a lamb. One of the letters in the year following said Bates had to die, there will be more, signed by a symbol resembling the letter Z. So people think that this might be the Zodiac. But okay, so yeah, the first letter was The Confession. The one the year after was the one that said Bates had to die, which is like one of the famous letters. I think I have a copy of it right here. Bates had to die, there will be more. And then the kind of third set was in 1969. They sent one, the Zodiac sent one to the San Francisco Chronicle and the LA Times at the same time. And I think he sent it to a third source, but we'll go over that in the letters video. That will be more in depth because this is kind of like, there's just so much information, you guys. Like, I can go balls deep in a case and still leave out a whole bunch of information. So the one that was sent to the LA Times said, I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. The Zodiac is kind of like taunting them with the idea that there are more undiscovered murders that they'll just never get to. Well, that's why it is kind of attributed to the Zodiac killer, just because he wanted to take credit for them. He took credit for them in his letters. He mentioned them various times and offered different details that the police hadn't really released to the public, so he knew things that only either the killer would know or him being the killer would know. So yeah, that's kind of the Cheri Jo Bates case. It's a little, it's not as detailed as I wanted, but the thing is, like, when you start researching these individual cases, some of them that are kind of unofficial or much smaller, kind of like this one, you run into a lot of the same information. And so it really isn't going more in depth, it's just kind of repeating the same thing over and over. So if I missed anything, please leave that in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to keep researching, make some corrections in the next episode, because I feel like I need to kind of go through this a lot more. But okay, I'll see you next week. Maybe I'll make, you know, a bonus video kind of going over more information about this case. Maybe I'll just like add it onto the next video and it'll be a long one. I have no idea. Okay, well, thanks for watching. I'm sorry I'm a mess of a woman.